Constitution of sentence. First topic. Subject. What is the definition of subject? The subject of sentence is the person, place, or thing or idea what's performing the action. The subject, the naming part, the subject tells who or what the sentence is about. The subject can be a noun, proper noun, or pronoun. Let's look at some example of sentence in English sentence. The first, Janet showered her dog. Janet is the subject, showered is the action performer. In the second example, Tom worked from sunrise to sunset. Tom is the subject and worked is the action performer. Simple subject, complete subject, and compound subject. The simple subject refers to just the noun that is performing the action in the other words that are describing the noun. In this example, the blue-eyed boy played on the jungle gym. Boy, simply subject that performs the action, play. Complete subject. Subject includes the noun that is performing the action in any description of that noun. In this example, the hairy three-eyed monster scared the young girl. The hairy three-eyed monster, complete subject that performs the action, scared. Compound subject are ones in which two nouns perform the action. In this example, Chris and Janet love to read comic book. Chris and Janet, compound subject that performs the action, read. Predicate. What is predicate? A predicate is the grammatical terms, the words in a sentence or clause that describe the action but not the subject. A complete sentence or clause requires two parts, an action in the person or thing that's performing the action, while the subject describes who is doing the action. The predicate describes the action itself. In this example, I ran in Max barks. I is the subject, ran is the predicate. Max barks, Max is the subject, bark is the predicate. The simple predicate. A simple predicate is the most basic form of the predicate. It consists of only the main verb and the auxiliary verb. In this example, Mr. Young went to the market. Went is this example is only the word went. In the second example, we have been waiting for weeks. Simple predicates include the verb waiting, and the auxiliary verbs have and be. Modal verbs like can, might, will, or must are auxiliary verbs, so they too are parts of the simple predicate. In this example, I might be incorrect. Complete predicate. This includes the simple predicate as well as other words that describe the action. In this example above, when Mr. Young went to the market. When is the simple predicate, but the entire phrase, went to the market, is the complete predicate. Compound predicate. A compound predicate includes two or more verbs that all share the same subject. In this example, she showered and dressed in her fitness clothes on her dog's birthday party, but the dog never showed. The verb shower and dressed all use the same subject, she. In this example, all the verbs belong to the same clause and therefore to the same compound predicate. But be careful with the sentences that have more than one clause. In this case, each clause has its own different predicate. In this example, there are two separate predicates, the original compound predicate and the second predicate never shows. That uses the new subject, the dog. A predicate adjective in this case is when the words following a linking verb and adjectives or adjective phrase in the modify the subject. In this example, Annie was happy with the last day, and the simple predicate is was. The past tense of the linking verb is be. The adjective happy describes the subject and, making a predicate adjective, the prepositional phrase with the last day relates to the adjective happy, so its to is the part on the predicate adjective. How to identify the subject and predicate. Subject, who or what the sentence is about. Noun, proper noun or pronoun. Predicate, what is the subject, does or is, begins on the verb. In this example, the sun was shining brightly. The sun is the subject. Was shining brightly is the predicate. My mother and my aunt are training classic dancer. My mother and my aunt are the subject. Training class dancer is the predicate.
Next, direct object. A direct object is a word or phrase that receives the action of the verb. For example, in the sentence, the students eat cake, the students is the subject, eat is a verb, and cake is a noun. But cake is receiving the action of the verb. Cake is what's being eaten, so cake is the direct object. Direct objects aren't always just one word. They can be phrases or even clauses. These phrases will function as nouns, so noun phrases. That's why they can function as direct objects. For example, in the sentence, the football hit a car parked outside. A car parked outside is the direct object because it's what's receiving the verb, so hit. Or in the sentence, don't forget what your mother said. What you can't forget is what your mother said, so that whole sentence, that whole phrase, it's the direct object. And same here, English professors love naming every tiny word in a sentence. What professors love is naming every tiny word in a sentence, so that whole phrase is receiving the verb and it's the direct object. When it comes to pronouns, English uses two different pronouns to refer to the same person depending on whether the pronoun is used as a subject or an object. For example, if you are talking about yourself as a subject, you will use the pronoun I. But if you were talking about yourself as the object, you will use the pronoun me.
Now let's talk about the indirect object. First, what is it? The indirect object of a sentence is the recipient of the direct object. The direct object is the thing being acted on by the verb. And for example, here we have Sarah gave John an apple. Here we can see that the indirect object is John because he is acting like the recipient of the direct object, which in this case is an apple. And in the next example, the vicar told us a fable. Here we can see that the indirect object is us because it's acting like the recipient of the direct object, which in this case is a fable. Now, how to find the indirect object? To find the indirect object, we need to find the direct object first. And in order to do that, we need to find the verb and ask what. Once we found the direct object, we ask who or what received it. Now, in this example, he gave the parrot a chance. We need to find the verb first, which in this sentence is gave. Now we have to ask what, or more specifically, gave what. Now we have found our direct object, which in this case, which is a chance. And with that information, we can now ask who received it or who received a chance. And in this case, leading us to the answer of who the direct and indirect object is, which in this case will be the pirate. Now let's talk about the indirect objects preceded by to or for. Often the preposition to, and sometimes for, will precede the indirect object, which makes spotting the indirect object much easier. And this happens when the direct object comes before the indirect object. For example, she gave a letter to Jennifer, which if we compare with she gave Jennifer a letter, we can see the preposition to is now omitted. And well, some grammarians claim that a direct object is not followed by to or for. For example, in the sentence, give the box to Sarah, some claim Sarah is the object of the preposition to, and not an indirect object. While in give Sarah the box, everyone agrees Sarah is an indirect object because there is no preposition. Now let's talk about the objective case. In English grammar, objects, direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of prepositions are always in the objective case. In English, this only affects pronouns, but not all pronouns. For example, give us the diamond. The pronoun us is the indirect object of give. It's the objective case version of we. Objects and verbals. Not only verbs can have direct and indirect objects, but verbals also can. Verbals are infinitives, gerunds, and participles. For example, we have first the infinitive. To give me a gun was a lunacy. Here we have the infinitive to give, the direct object a gun, and the indirect object me. Then we have the gerund. I was planning on presenting John the wooden spoon. Here we have the gerund presenting, the direct object the wooden spoon, and the indirect object John. And finally, we have the participle. Throwing her dog a dirty look, she stormed out of the room. Here we have the participle throwing, the direct object a dirty look, and the indirect object her dog.
Next is verbs. First, we're gonna talk about transitive, intransitive, and a little about the transitive verbs because they relate to the direct and indirect objects. Verbs that can take a direct object are called transitive verbs, and those that can't are called intransitive verbs. That's because intransitive verbs can't complete actions by themselves, and they don't need a complement to, complete the predicate. Verbs like go, walk, run, talk, sit, and sleep, and work are examples of intransitive verbs. Verbs that use a direct object, but I already said, are called transitive. And some examples are clean, like, love, dislike, hate, want, learn, deserve, and say. Because, for example, to clean, you have to clean something. It can be just a verb. It needs a direct object that reflects what's being cleaned. And also, verbs that use both direct and indirect objects are called intransitive. They don't always need an indirect object, but they have the option. For example, verbs like throw, make, buy, sell, read, give, lend, or bring are the transitive verbs.
Then we have the action verbs. Action verbs express activities that a person or thing can do. For example, Lee eats cake. Eating is something Lee can do. And in the example, the bird chased the salmon in the shallow rapids. Chasing is something the bird can do. Then we have the static verbs. Static verbs serve to express states instead of actions. A static verb relates to a state of being, a thought, or an emotion. For example, I am at home, she believes in fairies, he feels elated. Then we have auxiliary verbs. An auxiliary verb accompanies a main verb to help express tense, voice, or mood. The most common auxiliary verbs are be, have, and do. Here are some examples of auxiliary verbs. Lee has eaten all the pies. Here, the auxiliary verb has, it helps to express the tense of to eat. And in the example, the table has been prepared. Here, the auxiliary verb has been helped to express the voice of to prepare. In this case, the passive voice. Next, we have modal verbs. Modal verbs are a type of auxiliary verbs that express ideas such as ability, possibility, permission, and obligation. The modal auxiliary verbs are can, could, may, might, must, ought to, shall, should, will, and would. For example, we have Lee can eat a lot of pies. Here, the modal verb can helps to express the idea of ability. And in the example, Lee might eat that pie before he gets home, might helps to express the idea of possibility. In the next example, Lee may eat as many pies as he likes, may helps to express the idea of permission. And for phrasal verbs, we have the phrasal verbs are verbs that are made up of more than a single word. They usually have a main verb and another word. which can be either a preposition or a participle. Also, phrasal verbs usually have a meaning different from the main verb. For example, a burglar will often break a window to break in. Here, the phrasal verb break in means to enter illegally, which is different to break. And in the example, if you drop the baton, the team will drop back to last place. Here, the phrasal verb drop back means to fall behind, which is different to drop.
Following, now we have nouns. The nouns are words or part of speech that refer to people, animals, places, or things. We include that they may talk about abstract ideas, concepts like sincerity or success, and emotional states like being happy or being sad, plus bodily sensations. When we come across a word, how can we be sure that it's a noun? Well, these words have certain morphological identifying features that help us to decide whether they are a noun or not. Some of them are that most of the nouns, have both singular and plural form. They can have a genitive or a possessive form that it's made by adding the suffix apostrophe s, and they can be preceded by determinatives or articles like a, and, these, that, those, and the, that help us to specify precisely the meaning of the nouns. They can also be preceded by adjectives that we'll explain further in the presentation. Now, there's a lot of categories of nouns, but we're going to talk about 4, being the first one, the proper nouns. Here we found all the specific names and that are spelled with a capital, what initial capital of a certain place, person, or idea. Which some of the examples can be the months of the year, like January, February, May, like Frankenstein, Boxy, Jessica, Java, Portsmouth, or even our own names like Juan Carlos, Giselle, Vania, Jesus, or Sebastian. They are not preceded by any article nor determiners. All the other nouns that we don't found here, we found them in the common nouns. The common nouns are the names that are not the specific of any particular person, place, thing, or idea. In other words, it's category. They can be preceded by the definite articles like the or this, or an indefinite article such as a or an. And now in here we've found the count nouns. And the count nouns have the following characteristics: that they can be combined with numerals like 1, 2, 3, as in say 1 chair, 2 chair, 3 chairs, and with expressions like several or many. They can be marked with the plural by adding the suffix s, but let's keep an eye for those with irregular plural form, such as man with men, or foot with feet. Those nouns that can't be counted are called mass nouns. These are the words that refer to things that cannot usually be counted, such as advice, bread, knowledge, luck, and work, like ideas or abstract concepts. They cannot appear in plural form normally, nor can they follow an an, determinants, articles, numerals, or similars, but they can follow some, like may I please wish me some luck. Now our next category will be the adjectives. The adjectives are the part of speech or word class that help us to modify a noun or a pronoun to help explain a characteristic. They mostly appear between the determiner, like the ones I've mentioned, these, the, and the nouns. As well, they have some morphological characteristics that can help us decide whether a word is an adjective or not. Some of them are that we can identify the endings, such as al as an equal, ous as in delicious, ic like in basic, what the letter y for like sleepy, ful like beautiful, and less like hopeless. Many adjectives have the morphological possibility of taking a comparative er suffix or the superlative est suffix. The adjectives that need a degree verb to behave as comparative or superlative adjectives are called gradable adjectives. There are others that have irregular comparative and superlative forms like good and bad, which are better and best and worse and worst.
Adverbs. Now, what is an adverb? An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, an adjective, another verb, or a whole sentence. Typically, they end with the suffix ly, but that is not the norm. A couple of examples of an adverb, it could be in the sentence, I'm very tall, tall being the adverb. Fortunately, school was cancelled for today, fortunately being the adverb. Time goes too fast being the adverb. But what is the function of an adverb? As previously mentioned, adverbs are used to modify verbs, adjectives, and adverbs in sentences. These have 5 different classifications: time, manner, place, degree, and frequency. How and when to use an adverb is very important. Writers are encouraged to avoid using excessive adverbs because they make your writing less formal. Now, you should also use adverbs close to the word they are trying to modify, because if you fail to do so, it can create the sentence format have a different meaning that you were trying to write. Now, prepositions. Preposition is a word that is used before a noun, pronoun, or noun phrase to show direction, time, place, location, spatial relationship, or to introduce an object. An example of a preposition could be in, at, on, inside, of, from, etc. There are 4 types of prepositions: preposition of direction, time, place, and location. Prepositions of direction are used to indicate the direction of the complementary verb. For example, she drove to the store, drove being the preposition, go right into the house, into being the preposition, walk on the sidewalk, on being the preposition. Prepositions of time are used to indicate time. For example, in, at, on. The weather is cold in December. I work on Sundays. He works part-time during the summer. Prepositions of place are used to refer to a point in the close vicinity of whatever the verb is talking about. For example, they would meet in the lunchroom. Meet being the preposition. She was waiting in the corner. Waiting being the preposition. And the prepositions of location and spatial relationships are used to indicate, again, the place of the verb. For example, they live in the country, this being an area. She will find him at the library, this being a point. There is a lot of dirt on the window, a surface. Another example could be his shirt is off. We will stop at many attractions along the way. And to refer, finally, a more complete list of spatial location prepositions could be above, across, against, ahead, along, among, around, behind, below, beneath, beside, between, from, in front of, inside, near, off, out of, through, towards, under, and within. As you could notice, a couple of the prepositions didn't use a single word but 2 or more. That is normal, and that is the case for some prepositions. And that is all for the presentation. Thank you for listening.